So for the truck bite, number 1, ask for the range of the following ordered pairs. You needed to list them least to greatest. Saeed, go ahead.
-5, -3.
So for this one, you should not have been repeating the numbers. I know -5 repeated and -2 repeated, but just put them once. And least to greatest. For number 2, it asks you to translate the following equation. The quotient of a number more than 1 and 3 is 5. And you want to kind of this more than is actually adding. So it would be a plus, not the greater than symbol. But what was the rest of that? Greater than over 3
equals 5.
And the way you can kind of tell which one to use is that this one has the word is, so it has equals, and we can't have equals and an inequality in the same thing. For number 3, I'm going to work that one out. We had to put this in for all of our x's. This was our x values, so we had to find our y values. So this would be a negative, this is already negative outside, this would be a positive 4, this would be a positive 2, and then we're adding 2 again. This would be a negative 4 plus 4, so our answer would be 0. So you could say f of negative 2 equals 0, or f of x equals 0. For which part? -2 times -2. Make sure you're using parentheses, because if you didn't, you ended up with something different. And then number 4, ask for the domain of this graph. This has endpoints. So we're looking at furthest point to the left and furthest point to the right. So this needs to look like this. It should be in this format. Okay. Number 5 also has endpoints. So this should look very similar, except with y.
One to 4.
Lowest to highest. Questions on either of those? Alright. Now let's go back to the notes. Anyone still need this? If not, go to the page that looks like this. We're gonna start with number 3 and then kind of work our way back to 1 and 2. Javier, do you have these notes? So with our word problems, our end goal, we're still trying to find an answer we're still going to end up solving. But we need to kind of translate this into an equation to solve it. So when we're doing this, as we read this, circle, underline, highlight anything you find that's important. That could be numbers, that could be if they give variables. what it's asking for, anything you see that's important. Operation words you see, those may be like very bold, like times, but it may be something that you're not really sure is the operation word. So I'm going to read just this first part, and then we'll talk about what's important here. So the total cost to rent and drive a car for one day is listed below for the two car rental agencies. Blue Car Rental charges $27.60 to rent a car, plus 18 cents per mile driven. Red Car Rental charges $40.40 to rent a car, plus 14 cents per mile driven. I'm going to ignore part A and part B right now. I just want to know, what do you see in this top part that's important? Or what do you feel is important? Please.
Charges 27.
Okay.
And it says 0.18 per mile.
That's important. So that's 40/40 on that 0.14 per mile. Okay. So in this, words like per mile, per, and for each means that these two things are going to go together and we're multiplying. So anytime you see the word per or for each, that means to multiply. So now, for part A, it's asking us to write an equation to represent the total cost. Total tells us to do what? Add them. We're going to add these numbers together to get an equation. So for the blue car runner, we don't know what the actual total is right now. We're just going to keep the parts together. We would have 2760 plus our 0.18 per mile after everything's part. So the per mile is something we don't know. We don't know how many miles were driven. So we need to define a variable that tells us something that we don't know. So we can say M is the number of miles driven. When we define our variable, it has to be very specific. It's talking about a number of, the cost of. Usually those are the two. And of whatever. So now that we know what M represents, we could say 18M, 0.18M. We could have also used X or any other variable. Say that one more. So can we add these two together? No. They're not like that. Bless you. What did you have a question on? So part B, we're going to do the same thing, but for the red. So again, we don't know what the actual total is. If we find M or find some numbers, we can put that in there. So R equals our 40/40 plus 0.14. We're still using M for both. Now, part C tells us to calculate the total costs at each agency to drive at 280 miles. Now we know what M is, we can put this in for M and find the total. So I'm going to rewrite those. and kind of leave a blank space. And now, since we know that M is 280, you can put that in kind of like when we were evaluating or using function notation. Put that in for M, and we can put that in our calculator. What would this be? I have another battery somewhere up here. The batteries like jump out and disappear all the time. Or I thought it is. What's it? It's probably in the pocket. So you
Is the answer 78?
So in your calculator, you would put in 27.6 plus 0.18 times 280. The red carbon is also up here, so that's 79.6, but I'm going to go back and write that first and then put the total. D asks us which company is a better deal. So which one would be better?
No.
Why?
It's cheaper.
So we could say the blue terminal because it's cheaper. And it's cheaper by how much?
It's like $1.06.
$1.06. So you could use that to go get Taco Bell or something from the menu.
Who likes Taco Bell?
I like Taco Bell.
That's for get out of here.
Huh?
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's fine.
No, stop.
Taco Bell is bad.
Anyway, we're not going to get into that.
Your days are numbered.
Your days are numbered. Liking Taco Bell is a sin.
So you,
So for E, we just change the miles from 280 to 400, right?
yes. So for part E, same thing except for the same thing. Which one do you think is going to be the lower cost?
Oh, the red, but the blue.
Okay. So put in your calculator and figure that out.
That's hot.
Okay. For you're looking ahead, but that is the right answer. So hold that up. What is the total for blue? The total for red? Minus
96.4, yeah.
Okay, that sounds right.
96.4.
So the red one is the cheaper one.
In the long run, red is going to be cheaper, but if you just need to drive, then
Blue is
yeah. We're going on a
400-mile car ride. That's like me driving to Ohio. I think it's actually a little bit less. I think it's 385 miles, but I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, usually with problems like this, because the cost per mile is so similar, it's not that far off. Eventually, these costs are going to be equal at some miles, and then one is going to exceed the other. So for part F, now it gives us the cost, and we have to find how many miles. So now we are going to solve this, because it gives us what it equals. And we have to find M. How would we solve this?
Subtract the 227.6 from the
What would this be when we subtract?
What? Wait, hold up.
I think we added.
Added.
3.6. Yes. 43.6.
43.6.
And then yes, divide both sides by 0.18.
242.2.
Now, before we finish this, some of the word problems will give you decimals, and you have to think about, can I have decimals for this? Can I have 0.22 of a mile? Yeah. So we can leave this as a decimal. Usually we're talking about like objects, food, people, cars, things we don't split in half or in fractions. We want to keep those as whole things. If we're talking about population as like a whole population can have decimals. But it depends.
How would we find like the perfect miles? Both of them are equal. Is there an equation?
We would have to set both equations equal to each other and solve. So our next set of notes is when we have variables on the side. If you remind me, we'll come back to this and we'll do that. When we finish a problem, we have to make sure we specify our units. We're looking for miles. You could be more specific and say miles driven, but miles works. Yes,
So on test, we just put a number and then write down miles.
yes. But if you did put miles, I would say 242. We're going to do the same thing for the red car. But now this costs $83.40. And then divide both sides by 0.14.
307.
307.1.
1.1428571.
We'll put 24. So if we could round up, we would round up. If not, leave it or round up. There will be some times where we have to run down, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. It just depends. I think that's more for inequalities, but we'll get there. Most of the problems you'll see won't have this many parts. Usually it would probably just be like one of these, like a blue car rental, and then you do find the total cost and find this is this. Okay.
Are we gonna do that in one?
Yeah, we're gonna go back and do one. But we're gonna do two before we do one. So again, I'm gonna read this, circle, highlight, underline anything you find that's important. To mail a first-class letter, the U.S. Postal Service charges a flat rate of 53 cents and 18 cents for each ounce. It costs $2.69 to mail your letter. How many ounces does your letter weigh? Donovan.
Oh.
Okay, you stopped it already. Hold on 1 second. What is important here? Saeed.
0,
Whoa.
and 269.
Okay. All of the numbers are important to me. What does it want us to find?
Ounces.
How many ounces? So first, anytime a problem talks about like a flat rate, a membership fee, things like that, that's like you're gonna get that charge regardless. So for this case, flat rate of 52 cents, your letter could weigh nothing, but you're still gonna get charged at 53 cents. That word for each, we're gonna multiply. If it costs $2.69, what did we do to these two to get this number? It doesn't say it, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? Assuming that it's talking about total. That wasn't the actual word I was looking for, but implying. That's what I was looking for. So it's implying that it's talking about total, so you have to add. And then we need a variable to signify what we don't know. So we don't know how many ounces it weighs. I would avoid using O, because you might confuse it for a 0. Z for OZ ounces works. If you want to use something else, that's also fine. I'm going to use Z, and Z is going to be the number of ounces. But O. Again, you can, but I would not recommend it, because you might confuse it for the 0. You could also swear up and down that you won't, but I've seen it happen, so keep that in mind. How would we write this equation? Okay.
So we have to count the flat rate, so plus 0, 1, 2,
And then if you put this the other way, that's also fine. 3 plus 0.18z, that's fine. Yes, so we're going to subtract that 0.53. We have 0.18, z equals 216. And divide both sides by 0.18. And Donovan, say that again. 12 ounces. So you could spell out ounces, or you could just put OZ. When dealing with word problems, you should not be getting negatives. it wouldn't make sense to have negative ounces, negative costs, kind of, because there would be people owing you money. But unless it's talking about like actual pick a number type thing, like where you're looking for two numbers, not really a real world scenario, that would be the only time you get negative numbers. Do you have any questions on this one? The Khan Academy that is due tomorrow night will be more problems like this. So set it up, solve. Be careful, because sometimes they'll have you put in like what the thing is, what the unit is. Yes, there is. But it's on the entire set of notes. There were problems like that. Okay. And then the last one we're going to do together is this number 1, and then I'll let you practice some. So this is nice because we don't have to define our variables because it's talking about length and width, so those are our variables, L and W. So this one says that the length of a rectangle is 3 inches more than the width, the perimeter is 30 inches, find the dimensions. What's important here?
The length is 30 inches more than the width.
Anything else important?
We know that 2L plus 2W equals.
So I'll write that here in a second. But in the given word problem, the perimeter. Yes. And what are we looking for? Which means both length and width. Okay. So if you didn't know, I'm going to write this up here, but you should remember that your perimeter, you're adding up all the sides. And another way to write that you're adding up the size is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. You're going to see that a lot, especially moving on to geometry. Now from the equation, or from the words they gave us, we know something about the length, not really anything about the width. So let's look at just this first part. The length of a rectangle is, this means two, or it means the word equals. And 3 inches more than the width. What operation are we using there? So I can say that my length is 3 plus W. We know that much from what it gave us. Then we know that our perimeter is 30 inches. So we can set this equal to 30. You have it solved.
Now it's going to save the equation.
Okay. Hold that thought. Because we're multiplying 2 times L, and we know that this is L, we're going to put this in parentheses in the equation.
So the 30 would equal 2 parentheses 3 plus W and parentheses plus 2W.
We don't know anything about W, we just know we're going to multiply that by 2. We know that we're multiplying our length by 2, and we know this is L, which is why that's in parentheses. Once we have that set up, we can solve it. So distribute to get 6 plus 2W. You have like terms you can combine, so combine them. And then after that, it's like a normal equation that you can solve. So subtract 6 on both sides. Yes, okay. And then divide both sides by 4. Right. 6 what? Inches.
And then to get the length, well, we know it's 3 inches or 1
Yes. So you would just put 6 back in, and because it's 3 plus, L would equal 9. If you have any questions on that one, say that one more time. How did 24 do what? We subtracted 6. On the next page, here are the problems I want you to try. Not really the first page. Flip it over. I want you to try example 6 and example 10. If you finish those relatively quickly, you can try 9 and 11. But 6 and 10 are your main priorities. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about that in 5 to 8 minutes. Yes. I'll send you off. This one, the setup is kind of similar, but a little different. So this one says that here it has $1, less than 3 times as much money as Liz has. Then it says together they have 179, and we're looking for how much money does only Garrett have. So you should have 2 variables for this one for Garrett, one for Liz. Let's see. Amount. Use X and Y, X and another variable. So for Garrett, it says $1 less than 3 times as much money. So $1 less, subtracting, but the 1 has to go to the end. 3 times as many. So we're multiplying 3 and L, and subtracting 1. We know that much about Garrett. We know that, let's say, if I were to make a separate equation. Together, if I had kind of flowers together, I added G plus L, their amounts together. But also what I know is that this is Garrett, so I can rewrite that to say 3L minus 1 plus another L. So this is Garrett's amount plus Liz's amount. And I can simplify it, or start solving. So combine my left terms, and then solve. So add 1 to both sides. And divide both sides by 4. So your unit here would be dollars. But it didn't ask us to find Liz's amount, it asked us to find Garrett. So we have to put that back in and see what that would be. So 3 times 45 minus 1. What did we get for Garrett? 3 times 45 is 135. 135 minus 1 is So with these types of problems, you kind of have to think about it as one problem, putting it into another. Any questions on that one? And then we're going to go down to number 10. So for 10, it said the length of a rectangle is 5 inches more than 4 times its width. And we know our perimeter is 90 inches, and we still have to find the dimensions. So again, make an equation for your length. 5 inches more than 4 times its width. We know we're adding and multiplying. 5 plus 4w. Our perimeter equation has not changed. It's still that P equals L plus 2w. I can put this in for L, put 90 in for P. And then solve from there. So I have to distribute. We get 10 plus 8w. Combine my like terms. We get 10w. Subtract this 10 on both sides. And then divide. I put the shorter symbol for inches instead of writing IN, but either or is fine. And then I gotta go back and find my length. So if I put 8 in here, this would be 32, plus 5 is 37. So 8 inches and 37 inches were our answers there. Do you have any questions on that one?
Can we go back to the
So I meant after we start our these notes, because you actually need to know how to do this. Which is the next thing I was going to ask you. So originally I had planned to start those notes. We have time to start them, but you could also use the rest of this time to practice going through these word problems, through your Dr. Math, and your Patagonia. Which would you rather? Practice. That's what I thought. So Tuesday, we'll start our next set of notes, which is solving equations that have variables on both sides. So you can go through, if you're going to continue practicing on here, I would say try number 7, try number 9, and try number 11. If you would rather try the Dutch Math and the Khan Academy, that is fine too. Try the Dutch Math, do the Khan Academy, let me know if you have questions. And then next class we'll start on unit. No. You do not need to do these, this just if you wish